You're doing a lot of work around the science of happiness. Kim, for someone who doesn't feel happy or understand that there's a science for happiness, how would you break it down for them?
Yeah, well, first of all, I think the definition of happiness that we all have is that it's a destination that you finally reach, and in order to get there, you have to kind of jump through these hoops. And so it's like when you finally got the good job, or you have a good paycheck, or you get married, you have kids, you accomplish all of these things, and when you kind of follow that trajectory, then at the end is this like pot of happiness that is waiting for us. And then now you have sort of arrived. And what we know is that is not true for any of us. We're all a mixture of happy and unhappy all of the time. I mean, last week, or this whole month, I think I have like 20 some flights. 90% of them have been delayed. So like I'm extremely unhappy at the airport. My stress levels are super high. I finally make it to my hotel. I don't get a lot of sleep. I wake up the next morning. I'm back to happy because I get to speak in front of thousands of people, and it's my favorite thing to do. I go work out. I feel happy. Then I get a slew of emails and I'm back to unhappy. So just understanding that even throughout the day, we are all a mixture of happy and unhappy. And it's really not a destination that we're going for. It's more like a direction. It's more of understanding that we can all get happier. We can actually raise our baseline, which I do want to talk to you all about. But it's like that I'm fueling some intentional practices towards this idea
Mm,
of feeling more satisfaction, contentment, fulfillment in my life that make up this kind of pot of happiness, so to speak. What's really interesting, George, is that we all have what's called a baseline happiness level. So maybe my baseline happiness level is a little bit lower than yours. So
mhm,
what this means is some good things happen in our lives and our happiness levels go up from that baseline for a period of time, but they almost always return to baseline. So
mm,
like, let's say that something really good happens in your life. I don't know, maybe you get a new home and you're excited and your happiness level rises, or you get a new job, or you get a promotion, or whatever, your kid gets into the college they've been dreaming of. Then your happiness level will take a little bump up. And that bump might last 2 hours or 2 days or 2 months, but it's always going to come back to whatever your baseline is.
mm,
And George, where it gets really interesting is the same has been proven for when we endure really hard things in our life, that we can endure loss and trauma and grief and struggle and adversity, and our levels will dip. But for most human beings, they do recalibrate back to baseline.
mm. You know something, Kim? When I started speaking and being a coach full time back in 2017, I used to get really nervous and get a lot of anxiety in the beginning. But then once I got going, I did a great job. And then my passion and my excitement took over. And I got a book called Relentless: Going from Good to Great to Unstoppable. It's by Tim Grover. He was Michael Jordan's physical and mental coach. I listened to this book, followed the advice in it. I want to say for about 2 to 3 years before it became a part of me. Later, I discovered that scientifically, there are external factors that can make someone happy. For example, you get some money if you're struggling. That'll make you happy temporarily. You find a new relationship, you get a brand new car, something external. But the way to help yourself is to derive happiness and joy internally by knowing yourself and knowing what you like to do. So I started doing that every day, which in turn had me think about the things that I don't like to do or the things I don't like internally. And then I started to avoid those things as much as possible. That has, I want to say, recalibrated my happiness level and has
It,
put me
yeah.
here instead of here.
That's a great explanation of it. And so we have this thing in our brains called hedonic adaptation. It's our ability to adapt. And I
Mm,
always tell people if it's really cold outside and you come in and you sit next to the fire and you remember how good the fire feels the first couple of minutes. Your whole body just feels so good and so warm. But then after a couple minutes, you're kind of done with it, right? Like it doesn't feel as
Right.
good and you step away. It's because your brain has adapted to it. So the very same thing happens. Like when you get a new house or you get a little bit of money, or none of these things are bad. I live in a beautiful home and I appreciate it very much. But what happens is our brain will then adjust and then it moves the goalpost. And so let's say that you say, well, I'll finally be happy when I have this job and I make this kind of money. So then or it could be something simple like if I could just lose 15 pounds, I'd be happy. But what happens is you achieve that goal and then your brain adjusts to it. And then it goes, oh, now I need to move the goalpost. Now I
Mm,
need, I need to lose 20 pounds to be happy. Right. And so
right.
our brain just automatically does that as human beings. And so I love what you said, because what that book was teaching you is what I call is following the thing that actually lights you up, which
Right.
is hard to do because that took a ton of risk for you to leave your job and me to leave my job. Like those feelings the first few years are like so hard to live with. You are scared, but at the same time, you see that the things that fuel you and motivate you are actually the things that you get that propel you forward. And so I do believe that's an entire book in itself for sure. And I'm going to look that one up, by the way. I love that idea of doing those things that light you up. And how do we like figure out more of what that is? And that's another whole
That's a
podcast.
whole nother podcast. But you know
Yeah.
what, Kim?